Welcome, everyone. My name's Amy Bennett, and this is Taylor Krause, and we're going to have the Climate Advocate Training starting right now. And it used to be called the Group Start Workshop, if you've heard that term before, but thank you for coming. This is really the basics of all that CCL does, and we're going to be on a relatively tight time frame because we normally do this in 3 hours, and we're going to trim it down to 2. So if you see us racing, you'll know why. We want to, again, thank the host for getting all of this set up. It's wonderful. It's perfectly set up. Thank you for joining the tables that you're in, because we're going to do mock meetings with members of Congress. I want to thank Kathy and Craig for all the work they did setting all this up. It's just terrific. And so what we're going to do today is first want to just introduce myself. I've been Amy Bennett. I've been with the organization almost since the beginning. When Marshall stopped by our local community environmental fair, and he hooked me with his laser talk. We're going to talk about laser talks. And so I've been with the organization for quite some time. I'm the director of Congressional Liaisons and Lobby Days. And this is Taylor.
Hi everyone, I'm Taylor Krause, and I work at headquarters down in San Diego, and I'm the executive assistant to Mark Reynolds. It's a pretty fun job. And today I also wanted to welcome and thank you all for coming. I know there's a lot of other things that you could be doing with your Saturday, and so for you to take the time to come be trained as a climate advocate, I think that's wonderful, and look forward to doing this workshop with you all. So a little bit of housekeeping, if everybody can make sure that your phones are on silent. I made sure mine was on silent, really appreciate it. And then make sure that everybody has a pen. And for our very quick break that we have, around the corner is where the bathrooms are located. So if you turn out this door and then make a right, just to know that before our break time. So we are going to start off with a little exercise. For our first exercise, I'd like you all to ask a few of you at the end of about 4 minutes, I'll let you know, what you are most committed to and why. And what hopes do you get out of today's workshop? So talk amongst your table, and I'll let you know when the 4 minutes is up, and then we'll hopefully have a couple of you respond. So to repeat the question, we wanted to ask for all of you to talk about what are you most committed to and why, and what do you hope to get out of today's workshop. So with that, does anybody want to share what they talked about in their group? Don't be shy. So he said that he wants to understand carbon fee and dividend better so that he could explain it to people. Wonderful. Exactly what they were saying. We hope to accomplish that today.
And your names?
David?
I'm Linda Kramer, and I will also say that you specifically had 2 questions about it.
Well, the dividend part really attracted me from the very beginning, so I wanted to know more about it. I have a brother that lives in Alaska, and dividend is a big deal up there, as you're probably well aware. It's very well received every year. But I didn't know how we distributed that dividend in our plan, and also who actually will be identified as the people paying the fee. If I'm an owner of a trucking company, am I a fee payer, or am I a dividend recipient? So I'm, those are just because I'm very new to this.
You're among friends. There's a lot of people who are going to be learning this today, and we are going to get into that. In fact, I'll just jump in and tell you what we're going to do today. We're going to get into really breaking down the legislative proposal, but it'll be towards the end. I'll have a little bit of it in my section coming up. But what we're going to do is introduce CCL, introduce our history, our mission, our methodology, and the legislative proposal. And we really want to demystify this for you. So, and how you can be a citizen lobbyist and not have it be something where, how do I do that? You're going to know how to do it by the end of today, and we will definitely get into where the dividend, who's paying for it, and who's getting it, and where it comes from.
Thanks, Amy. So, yeah, today we're going to be going through a lot of information, and I don't want to discourage anybody that if you get a little bit lost, but just to try to hold your questions to your groups. We're going to be doing a lot of interactive workshops. So to start off all of the information, Meredith, the speaker in the beginning, touched a little bit about Marshall's background, but I'm going to get a little bit more into detail about it. So Marshall Saunders, he's the founder of CCL and gave the opening remarks. He lives in Coronado, California, where our headquarters for CCL is located, and I have the pleasure of working with every day. Marshall is originally from Waco, Texas, and 20 years before CCL started, Marshall devoted his energy to poverty issues by setting up microcredit loans in developing countries. He's personally responsible for generating over 1 million microcredit loans. However, Marshall saw Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth, and it immediately exposed to him these communities that he was trying to help were going to be susceptible to climate change and sea level rise. So after being trained by Al Gore to give these presentations, he quickly saw that if Congress kept giving oil and coal companies billions of dollars in tax breaks to continue what they're doing, how many light bulbs will it take to offset that? So he decided if he was serious about climate solutions to poverty, he needed to become serious about solving the climate crisis as well. 10 years ago, he started Citizens Climate Lobby with just 3 groups in San Diego. And today, we have over 456 chapters around the world, with 395 of those being right here in the United States. When he volunteered to address poverty, Marshall had joined up with that group that he developed a specific and successful approach to organize citizens to empower Congress to take action, and uses all of the values that we talked today in the opening remarks. So Marshall took that proven methodology and applied it to climate solutions. That group's name is Results. If you stick around CCL for very long, you will hear us talk about Results and their methodology quite a bit, which is something that we definitely elaborated on over time. We believe that Congress does not create political will. They respond to it. They respond to citizens, which is us. We, the people, can create enough political will to get Congress to act. If we build political will, grassroots energy, and build trust, we can create effective change to build a sustainable climate. And next, Amy is going to go over our climate change solution.
So, whoops. I'm gonna have to get used to this. I usually just talk really loud. So CCL is an organization that is for solving the problem. We're for common values. We're for respect and appreciation. We're for generous listening. And we're for both our economy and the environment. So the problem is we know that we need to lower CO2 and greenhouse gases to stabilize the climate. And most of you probably know since the Industrial Revolution, we had back then it was about 270 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and we're well over 400 now. So this is serious. We know 97% of climate scientists agree that this is a human-caused problem. And this may be new to you, is there are 98% of economists who feel a market-based approach, price on carbon, would significantly help in mitigating this problem. So, whoops, I think I just skipped something here. Just a moment. Yes, there we go. So CCL, our methodology is about supporting you, helping you become engaged. The staff here is all about supporting you so that you can be engaged in democracy. If we can empower you, we can show our members of Congress there is the political will out in the districts and that members should support that. They may not see it now, we want them to see it. So we propose a carbon fee and dividend, and we're going to get a little bit more into that later. And with this proposal, the emissions should go down, the estimates are 50% below 1990 levels within 20 years. So that's obviously the primary thing we want to do here, is get emissions lowered. And we feel that if the United States leads by pricing carbon, then the rest of the world will follow. We all have heard that complaint by, oh, if the United States is the only one doing anything, what good is it? We feel there we go, that this policy is something that will encourage other countries to come along. So in with that thought that we are for something, I want to share something from E.B. White. Many of you know him from Charlotte's Web. Some others of you may know him from Elements of Style, the writing guide. But this is something, a quote from him that is all about being for something. We call it save versus savor. Every morning, I awake torn between a desire to save the world and an inclination to savor it. This makes it hard to plan the day. But if we forget to savor the world, what possible reason do we have for saving it? In a way, the savoring must come first. So I'd like to ask you to pair up at your tables. Hopefully there's an even number. If not, check the table behind you. Pair up and think about something that's really important to you personally, something that's threatened by climate change, not by other environmental issues, but something specifically that you care about that's threatened by climate change, rather than a beach somewhere, maybe your local beach, and describe it to the person you're paired up with. I want to tell you a story that Mark shares a lot, and I love it because it's when he was a child and he was getting himself into trouble. One of the things that he really savored as a boy in his neighborhood was going and getting the very ripest fruit off of a neighbor's plum tree. You know, when it's really, really ripe and it's just like ready to fall off. If not, it's just fallen off and it just melts in your mouth. Okay, so if you can imagine Mark, a little younger, jumping over fences, you know, sneaking into yards and getting this wonderful ripe fruit. That was something that he just loves. And if you've ever been to his house, he's got a whole bank of fruit trees on the side of it now because he's planted them for himself and for his grandchildren. And one of the things that happened is he went to the local nursery because he wanted to get a plum tree. And he's in San Diego, as Taylor and I are. And the nurseryman said, it doesn't get cold enough here anymore. We can't grow those here anymore. And so that was something definitely threatened by climate change. But if you can pair up, as I said, and we'll have just 2 minutes each, and think about and explain to the other person something that you care deeply about that's threatened by climate change for either now or future generations. So go ahead. I want to go ahead now and read you something. And so this is from, this is a story about the Apollo mission in 1969. And it's from a book about Rusty Schweikert. I don't know if you all know Rusty. During the mission, astronaut Rusty Schweikert was let out of the capsule on an umbilical cord. Usually NASA keeps the astronauts compulsively busy up there, but a particular thing happened to Schweikert. Just as he emerged from the capsule, something went wrong in the capsule. Both Mission Control and Houston and the remaining astronauts had to concentrate on that problem. This left Rusty all alone, floating around Mother Earth in complete cosmic silence. During this time, Rusty had two profound conversion experiences. He looked back on Mother Earth, quote, a shining gem against a totally black backdrop. And he realized everything he cherished was on that gem, his family and land, music and human history with all its folly and grandeur. He was so overcome, he wanted to hug and kiss that gem like a mother does her firstborn child. Compassion flowed through him. Trained as a jet fighter pilot, he was a typical macho man, but a breakthrough of something bigger was washing over him at that moment in space. Schweikert's second awakening in space was a political one. He was a red, white, and blue American who believed that what he had always been taught, that the world was divided between the communist world and the free world. Yet while floating around Mother Earth, he saw that rivers flowed indiscriminately between Russia and Europe. Ocean currents served communists, socialists, capitalist nations alike. Clouds did not stop at borders to test for political ideology, and that there are no nations. Nations exist within the minds of humans alone. On returning to NASA, Schweikert was not debriefed by any spiritual director about his mystical experiences. He confessed to having wandered around in a state of stupor for about 6 months, bumping into walls, asking himself repeatedly with this one question: why did God do this to me? Finally, he concluded that God did this through him so that others might hear that message. What message? Compassion, interdependence, shared beauty on this shining, glistening planet. The holy earth, we must take such good care of it. It must take such care of us. This side of heaven, we are all, each of us nearly has, as all the other has. There is darkness all around us, yet between us there is just enough light to get by. Again, CCL is for something, and we hope that, you know, you thinking about your experience and what you're wanting to say will help you in this mission. So I'm going to turn it over to Taylor.
Cool. Thanks, Amy. So for this next part, I'm going to go over CCL's mission, which we touched on a little bit earlier today, and then read you a couple more passages. I know that we're reading a lot, but it's very difficult to understand CCL's way until you envelop yourself in it. So these stories are a little bit more helpful to help you understand CCL's mission. So we are organized by two different purposes: to create the political will for a stable climate by showing leaders the will of the people. The second is to empower individuals to have breakthroughs in exercising their personal and political power. Most often, this is done by stepping outside of your comfort zone. CCL is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. We think politicians do not create political will, they respond to it. And it is our job to create that will. Politics and getting elected to Congress means getting votes and fundraising now. Responding to constituents needs to regain its place. So to demonstrate the CCL concept, here's a story by Gandhi and General Smuts, if any of you have heard of it before. But Gandhi, he's a pretty famous advocate. Before Gandhi went to India, he went to South Africa. He asked for a meeting with the head of the South African army, General Smuts. Smuts was a big man, over 6 feet tall, and in full military garb, in comparison to Gandhi, who was wearing a dhoti. So Gandhi starts by saying, "I'm here to tell you that I oppose your government." General Smuts responds, "Really? Anything else that I should know?" "Yes," Gandhi says, "and I intend to prevail." Intrigued, General Smuts then asks, "Really? And how do you intend to do that?" Gandhi replies, "With your help." How this is relative to CCL, we believe to enact successful change, we must work together, even with those who oppose us. So that goes back to our nonpartisan value of reaching across whatever political aisle or those who you oppose or disagree with. And I really feel like this story very much envelops that CCL value. Once again, I'm going to read you something powerful by Charles Reich from Power and the Law. Power seems to me pretty much the same thing as freedom. Power is the thing everybody wants the most that they can possibly have of. That is, skiing is power. Sex appeal is power. The ability to make yourself heard by your congressperson is power. Anything that comes out of you and goes out into the world, and in addition to that, the ability to be open, to appreciate, to receive love, to respond to others, to listen to music, to understand literature, all of that is power. By power, I mean human faculties exercised to the largest possible degree. So in a way, in a large sense, by power, I mean individual intelligence. Now, when you reach out to another person through the energy and creativity that is in you, and the other person responds, you are exercising power. When you make somebody else do something against their will, to me, that is not power at all. That is force. And force to me is a negation of power. So Amy has a really great experience where she experienced exercising her own personal power. And then we're going to go through an exercise about exercising your own power or experiences that you've had.
Finding that personal, having a personal experience when you're awakened to the fact that you have some power is pretty fun, actually. What happened with me was the neighborhood that I live in was having road construction done, and a road was being widened just at the end of our block. And what was happening is we were having a lot of cut-through traffic, cars driving really, really fast. There was no sidewalks on our street in Leucadia. It was just like, you could just see a matter of time before someone was going to get hit. So I went to a city council meeting about it and sat next to our PTA president, Mary, and the city council started asking for ideas. And I wasn't quite bold enough then, but it really helped me. They asked, well, what are some solutions? So I whisper in Mary's ear, they should put a roadblock up on Puebla Street, just down the end of the block. And she stands up and says, they should put a roadblock on Puebla Street, just right at the end of the block. And within a month, that roadblock was up. And I'm sure we've saved lives on the street because of it. And next time, I'll be the one that stands up. So I wanted to share that. Back to you.
So like last time, I'm going to ask you all to partner up and just share experiences where you've experienced power or forced in the absence of power. That also works. And again, each person will have 2 minutes and we'll tell you when to switch. And then if we have time, we'll take some shares.
But we're going to talk a little bit about our methodology. And we were so lucky that Marshall went over the values so much, so we won't go over those again. But I do want to let you know about CCL's one rule. And this is a rule that we have about meeting with members of Congress, but also, you know, as we develop political will in our communities, whether it's with our next door neighbor, the person behind us in line at the grocery store, or what have you, that our one rule is to treat our members of Congress and people in our community with respect, admiration, and especially gratitude for our members of Congress. So that was the one statement, and we all heard the values. That was such a fun exercise earlier. So now about how we actually organize ourselves, how we start a group or chapter. Well, one person says, you know, I'd like to start a group. And then they reach out to a handful of people, maybe go have coffee and talk about, you know, working on climate, listen to our introductory call, and then we plan a workshop just like this. Not normally with this many people, but that would be great if every single one had this many people. So we have a group start workshop. I think I did the one in San Luis Obispo. Who's here? You guys are from San Luis. I remember it was in Lyle's house, and that's way back when. So we have we used to call them a group start workshop. Now we call it climate advocate training. And then we move on, a group is formed, and we provide support that's centered around our monthly call. The monthly call is on Zoom now. It used to be actually a call only by phone. Now it's a webinar where we can usually see our speaker and Mark, and we can see all of you if you've got your cameras on your computers. And chapters are centered around, you know, someone's living room, in a library conference room, or what have you. So we generally have 3 things that happen on that support call. First, we get inspired. We have incredible guest speakers for the first 15, 20 minutes or so of the call. Some of those speakers have been Dr. Jonathan Haidt, Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, Dr. James Hansen. We had Senator Sheldon Whitehouse on the call, all kinds of specialists in various areas, so we're educated and inspired. We share what's happening with our chapters, what's working, finding out that San Luis tried something and then maybe another chapter over here can try that same technique. We have lots of ideas that bubble up from the chapters. And we very much emphasize training on communications and listening first. We know that trying to make the other person wrong doesn't work. We do know that listening and helping that other person feel heard allows them to then hear us. The second thing we do is we practice laser talks. We mentioned that, and there's on our website at the bottom of our main website, when it goes to a black section with white writing, there's laser talks. Also, there's lots of laser talks that answer very specific questions about our legislation. So we're going to go over that, but if there's anything that you didn't get, check there first and then contact me if you have a question. So the laser talks, what a laser talk is, we got this from the Results Organization. It's a way we practice powerful speaking. So they're bite-sized nuggets, really, of information, maybe describing how the dividend works, or describing how a border adjustment works, or describing some element that we want to convey. And they're not meant to be memorized, but they are meant to be said enough times to where it's really natural when someone in line at the grocery store says, what's Citizens Climate Lobby? That you'll have, or they ask you, what's your proposal? That you'll be able to say it. And we're going to practice that exact laser talk a little, just in a few moments. The third thing we do is promise to take action. And we commit to actions that we know are going to be useful. For instance, we know that Congress actually does not feel that a lot of the petitions that they get are very meaningful. So they in turn we know that personal letters to them are more important. We know that letters to the editor and op-eds are important. We know constituent letters of support are important. One of the things our members of Congress do, even though they're in Washington, D.C. much of the year, is they open up the hometown paper and see what letters to the editor are written and what op-eds. So we do a lot of that. We do outreach events, so Earth Day is going to be coming up. That's a great way of recruiting people, also a great way of getting constituent letters signed and educating the public. We do presentations. So all of those are actions that we might suggest on any given monthly meeting. That's the second Saturday of the month, and depending on what month of the year it is and what's going on in the world, we might suggest different action items. I remember back when the Pope had worked on his encyclical, we had a little more Catholic outreach, so we're very much try to be in tune with what's going on and what is going to be most effective at building political will and also showing our members of Congress that there is political will in the district. So those monthly calls are how we center our work, but there's a whole lot more to be found within Citizens Climate Lobby, lots of training, lots of activities, but that's the base of how we get going. Now, we're actually going to take a short break, and what we're going to do before that break is ask you, actually it's a working break, we're going to ask you to fill out a volunteer opportunities form. It's on your table, one of the items that's paper clipped. We've got a few, but just this one, it's called Citizens Climate Lobby CCL Volunteer Opportunities, and we'll collect them at the end of the break. It's kind of starting to ask, well, what kinds of things would you like to do? Of course, I mentioned the outreach events, writing letters to the editor. Obviously, lobbying is one of our things. We're going to get to that. I neglected to say that. Meeting with your member of Congress in teams is one of the things that we do. So you might, as I mentioned, we're going to take, about a 5-minute break, Taylor?
Be back at 10:15.
And so if you come back.
Okay. Thank you guys for filling it out. So for our next section, we will actually work on how we facilitate successful meetings with members of Congress. So our number one rule that Amy touched on earlier is that we need to find something that you can respect, admire, and appreciate about your member of Congress. One thing that we always do at CCL is that we start off our meetings with a statement of appreciation, finding something that you can actually sincerely appreciate about your congressional member. So this also means that even if you disagree with your member of Congress, you need to try to find something, anything that you can agree on. Really try to be in their shoes and try to start your congressional meeting with that message of appreciation. It really does set the tone for a great open communication filled meeting. And if you don't have anything that you can find to appreciate that, start to think about different ways that you can try to find that appreciation. And one of the ways that Amy has seen appreciation very effective in her life is through your personal story of your girlfriend. Yeah.
Oops, I forgot. I have a girlfriend that I knew ever since college, met her down in San Diego, and she is just one of the most upbeat people in the world. She's in sales, so this, I think is maybe true of many salespeople, but she's always upbeat and always a great listener. And she's really a great listener because she asks great questions. So whenever we're together, she's just always asking me about, it's not just how your day went, but she really dig into things. She's actually now learning about carbon fee and dividend. But she builds trust because she listens well. She's a... Anyway, she listens really well. She's always appreciating something about her clients. So she sells advertising, right? But with me, she's just the same way. It just oozes out of her. She's recently had to have a surgery, so I was kind of going over and taking care of her and bringing her food. And I swear, it seems like every minute she pays me a compliment. So evidently, you are all the second to know, I am the best egg salad maker in the world. But this is the power of appreciation. She just is constantly at it, and no wonder she's such a successful advertising salesperson. She's just in her, it just oozes out. So during this exercise, think about that common ground that you might share with your member of Congress and how you can find something to appreciate about him or her.
And starting off in CCL, it might be a little bit difficult if you don't see eye to eye with your congressional member. How would you even go about thinking about something that you just, maybe a person that makes you really, really irate? So once in a meeting, I'd like you to start thinking about what questions would you ask to find out more about your Congress member's world and trying to find a way to connect. So a good way is to keep asking questions that you try to delve into what their values are and some things that you can use to find common ground. What can you ask to find a common value and something that you can build to further develop on that relationship? So one of the best things for me before going into meetings is doing my research. That's for me, being prepared before I go into a meeting is really helpful and calms my nerves, knowing that I know a little bit about that congressperson. You can probably find many things that you can disagree on, but try to concentrate on something that you can agree on. So part of our job is to build trust with our congressional members, and that's one of the things that we've seen as the most effective in CCL, is building a relationship where our congressperson feels that they can talk candidly with us and they can trust us that we are genuinely updating them on climate or other environmental issues. So an added tip that I found very successful in keeping conversations up, and an example would be when I went into Ted Cruz's office at my first lobby meeting, and I was like, I know nothing about Texas or Ted Cruz, but being interested in what your congressperson has to say rather than interesting is one of the proven ways that CCL uses as our little secret weapon in these conversations with our congressional members. So for this next exercise, even though that this should be relatively done in advance of your lobby meetings, we're going to practice with partners again to identify something that you respect, admire, or appreciate about your member of Congress. And that's okay. Like, if you can't think of anything, discuss how you might go about finding this out. So again, partner up, and then I'll tell you when to switch in about 2 minutes. Okay, everybody, we're going to bring it back. Try wrapping up your conversations. I'm glad you guys know a lot of things to appreciate about your members of Congress. This is great. No. So in case some of you got stuck thinking about things and ways to appreciate your member of Congress, here are a couple suggestions. So congressional members have websites. They have news feeds. You can go on their Twitter page. For me, I find it most useful to look at the current topic that they're working on. It doesn't have to necessarily be about an environmental issue or climate change. That's great if they do. We also have bios on every congressional member that we lobby in community. So we didn't mention what community is, but it's basically our volunteer support system, which is an online website that once we sign up and get you in our database, you should be able to access, and is a really, really great tool to research anything and everything that you need to efficiently lobby your member of Congress. And next, Amy's going to go into our legislation.
Let's see, this is still working?
Yeah.
Good, okay, I'll just use this. Not having good luck with the other one. Well, yes, our legislation. It's actually a proposal. It's not a bill yet. It can't be a bill until a member of Congress actually drops it. What does that mean to drop? There's actually a box in Congress that you drop the paperwork in. So for now, we should actually call this a proposal. So there's 6 basic options that we have for Congress to confront climate change. First of all, we've got the status quo, where our whole society is financing fossil fuels by going along the way we're going, not paying for the damage that fossil fuels are doing. Second would be regulation. And this requires boots on the ground, eyes on the emission in order to measure what's happening and kind of policing the issue. And it's dependent on budget for enforcement. So we can see that having struggles right now. Then there's cap and trade, which those of you remember back in 2009, I think it was 2009 or 2010, it was a proposal that was passed in the House of Representatives but failed in the Senate. And cap and trade is actually a system of setting caps and issuing permits to pollute, and then there's a trading mechanism set up. It's actually pretty narrow in scope and doesn't do as much as we would like it to do, and it also sets up that there's a few traders who make a lot of money, but not as many reductions as possible. We're going to take questions kind of a little later here. Fourth is subsidies, where the government is going to pick who gets subsidies and who doesn't, which is picking the winners and losers, is what some of your Congress members might tell you, is they don't like that because it picks winners and losers. Then you have a straight carbon tax. This is like a tax on cigarettes or alcohol. We refer to it that as like a sin tax. That puts pressures on consumers, and it's actually highly effective. That worked quite well for cigarette smoking, but it slows the economy and gross domestic product. So then there's carbon fee and dividend, our proposal. Now this is where Congress places a fee on carbon, on greenhouse CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions, with 100% of the net revenues returned to households. We all get an equal share. It's actually a share for each adult in the household and a half share for every child up to 2 children. So if you have 3 children, you're still going to get just 2 half shares. So per capita, that's an equal share to each adult in the household and a half share to each child up to a maximum of 2 kids. And that fee is levied upstream. That's at the mine, the coal mine, the oil well, or in the case of it being shipped into the country, at the port of entry. And what happens is this fee graduates up. It starts at $15 a ton of carbon dioxide emitted and goes up $10 a ton every year. So that's going to be a gradual and predictable rise. So businesses can see that. Businesses like that certainty of seeing what the price is going to be. That allows them to plan long term. That allows them to decide, ooh, maybe the oil industry is not the one to be in, and I ought to pivot to solar or wind or something renewable. So they'll see the writing on the wall, and the smart money is going to shift to renewables. And that allows us, again, to make a really steady and predictable transition, not something that just all of a sudden, boom, tomorrow. It's gradual, and it allows the transition. Now, the recent study, I think I mentioned this earlier, but I'll go over it again. A recent study determined that within 20 years, that'll allow carbon fee and dividend will reduce emissions by 50% below 1990 levels. It'll also add 2.8 million jobs that wouldn't have been there otherwise. It will mean the avoidance of 227,000 premature deaths, and more than half of U.S. households, actually about 60% of individuals, would experience a net increase in the money that they receive back versus the increased cost that they will see at the pump. So at the pump, if you raised 15 cents or $15 a ton, that will usually translates to about 15 cents a gallon of gas that you're going to pay increase in fee at the pump, but the money back is going to cover that. And again, for 60% of the households, the money that you will get back, that green check, will cover that rise. And especially it protects the poor. So we're very happy about that. The check, I think it was asked that, where does that check come from? We would see that being just in the same way that we all got a check from the Bush administration when there was, I don't know if any of you remember that. I think it was a couple $100. It went through the Treasury, so through the IRS. And we do have studies on our website about how that delivery works, and a lot of more details on it. It's called the delivery, what was the name of that? Dividend Delivery Study. Got it. And that's on Community, and I do definitely recommend joining Community. It's like an intranet. It's a secondary website that just goes into a lot of these details a lot more deeply, and it has a whole action, there's action teams, there's all kinds of things on it, but you can get a lot of answers there.
Do you want to explain action teams?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, do I want to?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, action teams. Action teams, if you have a particular interest, whether it's science, communication skills, getting endorsements, there's all kinds of teams that you can join on Community, and you can have someone from the other side of the United States or the other side of the world working on an issue with you. If it's something you care about and you have skills and interest in, definitely check out the action teams. But back to the legislation. Economists tell us that in order to restore the integrity in the market, the money that we collect, that Congress collects, when this is passed, I'll be optimistic and say when this passes, that money should be returned to all of us. And we're really the people harmed by the carbon emissions. So if and economists agree that it should be equally per person. What happens when you return that money is it puts pocket change back in people's pockets and they spend it on Main Street, and you do see increased activity in the economy as a result. And it also protects the most vulnerable, the youngest, the oldest, and minorities. So we're very happy with that. That's a principle that Mark discussed earlier about anything that we do. So so what we're going to do is actually go over that and review a laser talk on it and do a laser talk exercise, and then possibly take some questions after that on the legislation. So we're going to do the exercise because it's going to help you understand it even better. I think it'll answer some questions. And then we're going to take some shares and questions about the legislation. So on your tables, you should have a handout that says Laser Talk, Carbon Fee and Dividend Laser Talk. And there should be 10 copies paper clipped there. You need any more, raise your hand and we'll get some out to you. In fact, I need to get my copy. And we're going to do an exercise out loud first, and then, yes, you need more. Oh, Taylor's going to come out with some. Anyone else need a copy? You found it? Okay. I need to get my copy. Okay, so everybody's got one. Just a moment, I got to get my copy. Do you have an extra? A minute, rather than lose my place here. Thank you. So I'm going to read it first, and then we're going to go over, and I'm going to have you read the sections that are underlined, but I'm going to go ahead and read it once, and that is carbon fee and dividend. Carbon fee and dividend is the policy proposal created by Citizens Climate Lobby, or CCL, to account for the cost of burning fossil fuels. It's the policy that climate scientists and economists alike say is the best first step to reduce the likelihood of catastrophic climate change from global warming. Our carbon fee and dividend proposal works like this. A fee is placed on fossil fuels at the source, the well, the mine, the port of entry. This fee starts at $15 per ton of CO2 equivalent emissions and increases steadily each year by $10. 100% of the net fees are returned to American households on an equal basis. Under this plan, about 2/3 of all households would break even or receive more in their dividend checks than they would pay for higher prices due to the fee, thereby protecting the middle class and lower income households. A border tariff adjustment is placed on goods imported from or exported to countries without an equivalent price on carbon. This adjustment would both discourage businesses from relocating to where they can emit more CO2 and encourage other nations to adopt an equivalent price on carbon. A predictably increasing carbon price will send a clear market signal, which will unleash entrepreneurs and investors in the new clean energy economy. So this is how we practice laser talk, so you really get it to sink in and learn it. So now I'm going to read it, but I'm going to stop when anything is underlined. And that's when I'd like you all to read out loud. Carbon fee and dividend is the policy proposal created by Citizens Climate Lobby to account for the cost of burning fossil fuels. It's the policy that climate scientists and economists alike say is the best first step to reduce the likelihood of catastrophic climate change from global warming. Our works like this. The well, the mine, the port of entry. This fee starts at $15 per ton of CO2 equivalent emissions and increases steadily each year by $10. Under this plan, about 2/3 of all households would break even or receive more in their dividend checks than they would pay in higher prices due to the fee, thereby protecting the middle class, lower income households. All right, great.
Beautiful.
This adjustment would both discourage businesses from relocating to where they can emit more CO2 and encourage other nations to adopt an equivalent price on carbon. A predictably increasing price will send a clear market signal which will unleash entrepreneurs and investors in the new clean energy economy. Awesome job. Awesome. Awesome. So what I would like to do is ask, what questions do you have? I know there are questions out there about the policy. Lady in green and then the man with the glasses after that. Yes. So what we're saying is, let's say Exxon is pulling the, let me just repeat the question. How do you know what that fee is supposed to be? So for instance, if you are mining coal, there is a scientific equation that you can find out what is per ton of coal, how much fossil fuels does that emit. The same works for other fossil fuels. There are a few exceptions where it's not going to be released into the atmosphere, but generally speaking, you can, once you know how much is pulled out of the environment at the well or at the coal mine or at the port of entry, you can indeed calculate a price on that. And the further upstream you do it, the better. There is some question as to whether or not it would be right at the coal mine, the oil well or at the refinery. There might be a little easier time doing that at the refinery, but generally, as far upstream as it is manageable, we would have that fee come. Oh, and there was, right here, yes. We did have one in Australia, but I think that is no longer existing. But one of the ones we like to point to, and it is not federal, I'm going to say this yet, is British Columbia, because they're going in that direction. But British Columbia did this, and there's a lot of really good data on how well it worked and how it encouraged businesses. So there were just a lot of green lights on that one, and you can definitely, I think there's probably a laser talk on that on the British. It was in British Columbia. But there are others throughout the world, but those are the two best examples. Yes? They will go until the problem's solved, and then it'll start going in reverse back the other way. So as soon as we transition, as the price of the dirty fuels gets more expensive, less people will want to buy it. Your natural choice for your next car, for your next product is going to be the one that's the most energy efficient. So over time, those products are going to be so expensive, there's not going to be a whole lot of Hummers left around. And was there someone who was waiting?
Yeah.
Oh, how about here and then here? And then we'll get over here. And this is why we want to see you in every lobby meeting that you can possibly be in, because we're not going to let that stop us. As citizens lobbyists, we're going to go in and always lobby for the best possible proposal. And then when that bill gets dropped, you are right, things can be added to it, but that doesn't mean we're going to stop lobbying. We're going to go in there and say, here's what we like about this, let's keep it this way. I'm sorry, I'm like jumping in and answering all these. And you've been standing up for a little while. Oh, you're taking pictures. Okay. And right here?
Well, I'm just concerned because it looks to me like
No, you. No, the more, no, you will get an equal, so all the money goes into one trust fund with the IRS Treasury, right? And then it doesn't matter whether you use a lot or a little, you get the same amount in the check, exactly.
See, that's my problem because
You will, you'll, and the less you use overall, you'll come out ahead. You are right, you're not gonna get a larger check, but you are gonna benefit in that you're not paying higher prices in the other products that are the dirtier products. And we're gonna take just a couple more, and then we will take them after the break, but they're gonna wanna serve lunch in here, so, yes, oh. Do you have
Well, so in terms of pricing carbon from a free market standpoint, this is the best solution. In terms of how that's politically rolled out, a lot of it is just semantics on what happens with that dividend portion. So we as CCL, we advocate for 100% of that revenue to be returned to American households, whether that's 85%, whether that's 15%, that's where it differs amongst economists and other politicians about where that money goes to. And so does that answer your question?
I don't know that the scientists have weighed in on a particular proposal, and a lot of times you'll see that won't happen, but there is a lot of support around well, here's something. To be politically viable, what we see is that if you're going to get a bill passed, you're going to need to get both sides of the aisle on this. So it was very interesting to us to see the amount of support that the Climate Leadership Council got on their proposal, which is not exactly like ours, but it's from a conservative group. One of the heads of Walmart, Schultz, James Baker, previous Treasury secretaries, have gotten together on that one, and we were very pleased with that. So I don't have data saying, this many groups have endorsed this particular policy, although that's one of the things we want to do is get more actual endorsements either for this policy or action on climate change. So I don't have a perfect answer for you, but we do think that because it's bipartisan, and if we can get Republicans on this, that it is the best solution to get both sides together on.
So wait, one more thing.
Okay, ahead.
It's just in terms of client scientists, it's not a unanimous decision, but we do in CCL have quite a bit of a scientific community. So on our advisory board, James Hansen, who was director of some kind of science thing at NASA, Goddard Space. He is one of our advisory board members and heavily is participatory in CCL. We have a lot of JPL scientists at up in the here in the Pasadena chapter. So it's something that it's heavily agreed upon, but not unanimous. Next question. Just because our lobby meeting outline of the way we facilitate meetings really is our secret recipe to forming these meaningful relationships with our members of Congress. So we always are appreciative in our meetings. We're always on time, so making sure that with your lobby team, you coordinate a time to be there a little bit early so you can meet with the congressional office on time. And we're always conscious of our time. So the other handout that we have is the roles handout. And in CCL, we try to be very organized before we go into our meeting to make sure that we accomplish everything that we want in this meeting. We assign roles. So what your roles will look like, it doesn't necessarily have to be this person is this one, this person is this role, this person. So you can actually, depending on how many people you have in your meeting, you can have multiple roles as one person. So I've gone into a meeting, if you look at your roles, and I've been timekeeper and note taker and appreciator, and so it really just depends. So not the most important role, but the best way to start planning your meeting is by electing a leader. And that leader is the person that is going to then delegate the roles to everybody and make sure that all of those roles are taken. So next in your meetings is just, like I said earlier, being interested in what your congressperson has to say rather than interesting. It seems that in these meetings, your congressional person or staff is much more engaged in the conversation if you're the one that's asking inquisitive questions and keeping the conversation going. So we also try to be as knowledgeable as possible in these meetings. So it really is it's important to be prepared for these meetings and knowing what you really want to talk about and what your congressional member is already working on, stances that they may have, and brushing up on things that they might be interested in. And like one of our values that we talked about is being focused. So in these meetings, we try to really have some kind of tangible action item. So having a specific ask of that congressperson before you go into the meeting and making sure that somebody in your lobby team or yourself is able to make that ask is really important. So in the handout there on the lobby meeting outline, if you go down to number 8 of our ask, these are essentially usually are very preliminary asks when you're going into congressional meetings. And they're exactly the same except for one word. And that word is, for Republicans, introduce, and for Democrats is support. So that's one of the major things that we do here in CCL is very much reach across the aisle to conservative members trying to lobby our legislative proposal. And then moving on, what that ask looks like for you will depend where the relationship with that congressional office is. If, for example, if you are joining a team to go into a lobby meeting that has already lobbied this member of Congress ahead of time, they might already have a very specific ask that they want to talk about. Or, for example, going into a meeting where there's a brand new environmental aid that you're meeting with the congressperson's staff that has no idea what CCL does, it might be a good measure to have a very simple ask. And so I also have some possible questions to kick off the discussion that's in your handout. And then this handout, again, it's not rigid. It's something that's trying to give you a little bit of structure going into these meetings. But again, it's a conversation with your congressperson. This is your representative who's there to advocate for your needs. So there are some other questions that are examples in this handout that you can keep the conversation going. And next in our meeting is that we always try to be organized. So next step is designating roles. So in the next handout is roles, so we're moving on to that one. I'm not going to go through each one of these roles, but I'm going to have you guys read through them and think about what role speaks to you, what's one that's most comfortable for you. And it's important to make sure that each one of these roles is taken. For timekeeper, for example, it's really important that you start off the meeting after introductions asking, how much time do you have to meet with us today? And sometimes it's only 15 minutes, sometimes it's a whole hour. And being very conscious of their time is a very staple CCL thing, as we expressed in our values. And so when there's about 5 minutes left, the timekeeper, it's important that you say, okay, we only have 5 minutes left. We want to be conscious of your time. And it's really cool when you have a congressional staffer say, oh, no, keep talking, like it's fine. And then next is the follow-up person is another really important role going into the meeting to prepare for, and choosing that person to make sure throughout the conversation with that staff member is keeping track of all the things that you need to follow up on. And at the end of the meeting, actually following up with that congressperson's staff or and making sure, do you want a hard copy of this? Do you want this mailed? Do you want this via email? And sometimes the follow-up person is just acting on behalf of the liaison, who is the person, the CCL volunteer who consistently interacts with that office, and making sure somebody is sending up those follow-up materials. So again, meeting leads are not the most important role, but before this exercise, it's very important that you designate a meeting lead first, and this person will then delegate the rest of the roles. So we are going to have essentially our lobby teams table by table. There should be about, give or take, 10 at a table, and then we're going to have some seasoned CCL veterans come in and act as their members of Congress. You're a member of Congress going into a meeting, and then facilitate a lobby meeting. That sound good with everybody? Okay.
All right, so let's finish up, and I want to see if some people have shares from their meeting or questions about what to do in a meeting. So if you want to raise your hand if you have a question or a share about how your meeting went or a question about what to do in certain meeting situations. Yes, right over here. Sure. Oh, yeah, do you want to give him a mic? We'll bring a mic over.
Hi, thank you. I think our meeting went quite well, given that it was largely organic and we had to kind of improvise. But one thing that I think we took away as we were discussing at the table is you may be encountering a denier of the climate situation, and leading with a thank you for the meeting, as was just mentioned, is probably a positive way to at least disarm the person and make this feel like a warm environment. We also just ran into a question about, we kind of proposed the carbon fee and dividend, and then there was sort of like a no, response, which is probably typical in many situations. So it was useful to encounter that. And I think a good sort of pivot, if the person doesn't believe in climate change, let's say, is to remember, and maybe this is from my background because I'm an air pollution specialist, is that air pollution is a very good pivot point that, hey, okay, you don't think the seas are rising or climate change is an issue. Well, local air pollution is an incredibly large issue in the United States. Thousands of people dying prematurely every single year due to fossil fuel combustion. So that's a very, and a lot of these congressmen, congresswomen have children, grandchildren. So I think that's a useful pivot point if the sort of carbon thing doesn't get their heart. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Other shares, yes.
First of all, this is a very interesting exercise, and our bogus congressman here should run for Congress. One of the things that we did sort of on the spot was when questions came up about, for example, the economic impact of carbon fee and dividend on his constituents that we didn't know the answer to, or something having to do with the Climate Solutions Caucus, we sort of sidestepped that by saying basically we would take that question back to the parent organization, and somebody from your organization, that is, would be contacting him or his office with the answer. Is that a legitimate strategy, as opposed to kind of just hemming and hawing about something which we really don't know anything about?
I'm a firm believer in absolutely saying when you don't know something. I'm still trying to figure out the question that I couldn't answer. But one thing that's really great about a question that you can't answer is you've just found something that you have a reason for a follow-up meeting now. So actually you could get back to myself or whatever, and I would give you the answer, and then you would take it back in your next meeting because you want to gradually move your member up the ladder of support. You may not, chances are the very first meeting is just relationship building, and you're going to find out the member's concerns. Then you're going to go back and find out the answers to the questions that he had, and then meet with him again.
So it's better if the answer comes back from us rather than if it comes back from you.
Yes.
Okay. That's a very good point.
You become a resource to the member that way. You want to be his best friend down the road, or hers. Yes, right here.
Specifically in reference to what you said about the first meeting being relationship building, my two favorite moments were several comments when the lobbyists complimented me, said they supported my work in the district, said they voted for me, just generally reminded me that they weren't just talking to like a friend about climate issues, but that they were basically pandering to me, and I felt very, very appreciated. I did. I mean, for a moment, I forgot I was pretending. I was like, oh my God, I'm a lobbyist. I'm a representative. I'm full of power, and all these people come to me. And it felt great. Additionally, when they said, here's the comments from the Chamber of Commerce, I felt like all of a sudden they weren't asking something from me, but they were like, we're friends, and I have a gift for you. And I was like, oh, I love this. They're making my job easier. They're my friends. I felt so happy, like I wanted to do something for them.
Awesome. That's great. Exactly. Be a resource to your member. Yes, right here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this as an opportunity to role play. It's very valuable to be able to go through this, not having ever done anything political and having this opportunity to do something for the first time in a friendly environment like this. It's very helpful for all us first timers that are here today to experience this with some veterans. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's what we hoped, is that you would get your feet wet.
Our representative was a member of the, is a member of the Climate Caucus, and we didn't get a clear answer to our asks. So if the answer is inconclusive or there is no answer, which I suspect is probably the case when you go to Washington, I've not been to Washington on this issue, how is that handled?
Well,
by
I think,
the team?
yeah, I think that in doing your research ahead of time, there's going to be some things that you may already know your member is uncomfortable about going there, whatever that answer was. So knowing that ahead of time, I mean, this was your first meeting, you know, that's bound to happen. But sometimes it's good to think about what you're going to ask from the member and how to set it up so you could find out at a later date. If it was something where he really didn't want to put a stake, he or she didn't want to put a stake in the ground and answer that question, that happens. But in other kinds of asks, sometimes you could say, well, do you know when, you know, if it was something that you think that this, maybe if you're met with a staffer and the staffer just didn't know the answer to the question and you felt like if he knew, he might have told you, it's a great follow-up opportunity. Well, could I get back to you? Would 2 weeks be okay? Is that about right? I can email you. How does, you know, so you have some opportunities to follow up. But I think initially understanding the difference between a question that he just isn't, you know, just doesn't want to answer versus, you know, so there might be another nuanced way. This is one of those examples where it's not checkers, it's chess. How about one more question and then we've got to jump ahead here. Over here.
Hi, our representative had economic interests that would be disproportionately and rightfully affected by carbon fee and dividend, namely refineries. And one of his main concerns was the economic impact to those constituents. And I wonder what the general response to that would be, because these industries are disproportionately and rightfully going to be hurt, and what kind of trade can we offer them? Is there some kind of job training or helping them go into other industries that are going to be benefited by this, or?
It's a really good question, and I think we're going to see that more coming from coal country than oil country. And we do have a tool for helping them gauge the numbers of jobs gained versus one of the misnomers. It's not always wise to point it out right away because you don't want to make the other person right or wrong. But for instance, in the coal mining area, that could be an issue, but also there's a lot of misinformation. So maybe down the road you could clarify, you know, how many jobs in coal are there. There's a lot of people who think there's all these jobs, and there's really a much smaller amount of coal jobs now. And one of the reasons, for instance, with coal that's going away is more because of fracking than anything else, and most of the miners know that. But with the oil states, where you've got an oil situation, we do have a household impact study where it goes in by district and looks at the number of the job, how the income is affected. So we have some tools to address it. It's not, you know, it's not like there's going to be a perfect answer every time because there are jobs affected. The other side of that is that it's gradual, and it won't be that those people in those positions lose their job tomorrow. There'll be a gradual transition, and there are some sticky issues there. So sometimes there's not the answer that you'd like, but I tend to see it more in coal than in oil. Oh, you know what? Really quickly, and then we got to go. Eve.
Thank you. I had that situation. I ended up with a one-on-one, face-to-face, the day after regular lobby day, with a representative from Houston. First thing I realized was be sympathetic, because they are trying to keep food on the table for their constituents. And I think letting them know that you get it and you understand that is a huge beginning. That object of the first date is to get the second date, you know, so you want to let them know you genuinely understand that. And the other thing, I love your thing, Amy, about gradual. And you can talk about there are far more jobs in renewable energy than in fossil fuel energy. And you don't have to believe me, the Bureau of Labor Statistics will tell you that. So that's an encouraging thing. And especially a lot of oil areas are near are low-lying, like Houston. So those storm impacts are getting heavier and heavier. And those you're talking about financial burden. So that's a way to get to it too. Thanks. Good question.
Thanks, Eve. Excellent. Empathy goes so far. This is huge. So we're going to finish up, and I want to point to your attention one other handout on your table that's called Volunteer Support We Provide. We want to support you in every way we can, and we have some amazing online tools as well as group leaders, state coordinators, regional coordinators. I'm very active in the liaison program where there's a representative for the member of Congress. But these, I want to offer you this as something to really look up and go after the support you need. Don't be shy. If you're lost about how to find any of this, talk to your group leader or me. I'm Amy at citizensclimate.org. But most of your answers will come by just going to community. Community is the website that is the intranet that has all of the extra details and the way for you to connect with each other. So most of your answers are going to be there. That's CCL Community, and it's community. I think it's on, hopefully on this. Yes, community.citizensclimatelobby.org, and you can link to it from our main website. We've got one-on-one support. We've got our national conference call monthly. We've got support calls for group leaders every Tuesday, climate advocate training, which Brett and I do online. If you want a refresher on this, we do it 2 Wednesdays a month. It's 2 parts. Citizens Climate Lobby University on Thursday nights. We have fabulous live webinars, action teams, as we mentioned before, and we have our national conference in DC coming up in June. That's when is that? June 10th, 11th, and 12th, and the 12th being the lobby day. And regional conferences just like this. So please hang on to that support document. We want to make sure before we close out today that everybody filled out a form, and we're happy to collect it now. Your next meeting, if you haven't already joined a chapter, will be the second Saturday of the month, which is March 10th is coming up. So see me if you cannot. You should be able to find your chapter by going to our website, Take Action, find your chapter. But if that email ends up if you email your chapter leader and you don't hear back, email me and I'll connect you. Sometimes these things end up in spam. Let's see, national conference. Oh, I saw some of you took pictures. If you've taken pictures today, we'd love a copy. Send them to Susan at citizensclimate.org because we'd love to share them with other people. And I am going to close with a couple of quotes. One of them is from Jay Butera, who's a volunteer who kind of had the brainchild of the Climate Solutions Caucus, and he has this pinned to a lampshade in his house. And it's his inspiration. So Jay says, and this is on the cover, by the way, of your sheet, but it's just so good, it bears saying out loud. I believe that I can have a major impact on the fate of our planet if I work tirelessly towards climate solutions. Think big and act fearlessly. I believe that bold actions by a few brave people can change the course of history and stabilize the Earth's climate. I believe I am one of those people. Doing this will not be easy or comfortable, but it's definitely possible. And since it is possible, I must try. I will not give up. And lastly, a quote from Buckminster Fuller, the things to do are the things that need doing, that you see need to be done, and that no one else seems to see the need to be done. So we hope that you got some questions answered today about Citizens Climate Lobby and how you can be involved. And come see me at lunch if you have questions. And thank you very much. Taylor, thank you, Taylor.